On today's video, I'd like to show you how I mix and master an ambient guitar piece. Let's get to work. Oh yeah! The next full-length Chords of Orion album is almost done. I'm so excited. I've got it mixed, well, obviously performed, recorded, mixed, and mastered. I'm letting it sit for a day or two just so I can catch, see if I need to do any last-minute tweaks before I get it off for the release. So again, I'm pretty excited about that. So I'd like to dissect one of the pieces on the album for you to show you how I mix and master it, kind of how I think about an ambient guitar track. So I've got Logic Pro up here, which is my recording software, and I've got the piece called The Soft Rains, which actually I've already posted here on YouTube, but I like it so much I'm throwing it onto the album. So I'll include a link somewhere around if you want to catch the original kind of performance and recording. Anyhow, here's a quick, super quick preview of what it sounds like. All right. Yeah, I like that sound a lot. That, by the way, that's coming from the Electro Harmonix Mel 9, all that goodness. All right, so let's start off with the main guitar track. And actually, the mix on this is pretty simple. Right now, I've got no effects on the track. Okay, so it's pretty full sounding. Obviously, there are pedals in use there, the Electro Harmonix Mel 9, some delay, some reverb, all kinds of good stuff. But I did want to EQ it just to kind of fine-tune things. So for that purpose, I used iZotope's Neutron 2 plugin. And I won't go through this. I've talked about this plugin a few times, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on what it is. But if you just look at what I've got going on here, the first thing up is an equalizer. And as I kind of mixed it, I used the equalizer to kind of chop out some areas and add some areas in terms of the overall spectrum. So let me show you what I mean. First off, I've added a little bit of a rise in the low mids, high lows area. So 1 to 200 hertz. That's this area here. Okay, and that's just to give it a little bit more body. Now, you'll see also that I did a little boost at about, 1400 hertz. So let's check that out. Okay, so that's kind of the mids, right? Kind of the highish mids. And with that rise in the lows and in the high mids, you've got a little dip here, which is actually good because in this range, 300, 400, 500 hertz, in that kind of mid-rangey thing, you can get a lot of mud in the sound if you're not careful. Here's what I mean. Yeah, so it's kind of nasty, right, when you exaggerate it like that. Also, this track was a little dull, so I just did a little bit of a high shelf on the EQ. So for those of you who don't know what a high shelf is, it's kind of like the treble knob on your stereo. It just kind of gently raises all the higher frequencies. Next up is just a little bit of compression. So let's check that out. Okay, there's no percussion in this track. There's no need for, a lot of compression, but this just kind of smooths things out and thickens up the tone a little bit. So very, very subtle. It's just bringing down the peaks just a little bit. Okay, that is the main guitar track. I did add one other track to this piece because I felt it needed a little more in the kind of the low end. I wanted a drone. Okay, I wanted a drone. So here's what it sounds like. Yep, it is just a drone all the way through. And I'm using the Alchemy plugin from Logic Pro. It's a soft synthesizer, and no, I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but here it is. And I basically selected a preset, and then I adjusted it to my taste. So I'll let you try to figure out what preset it is if you have Logic Pro. All right, so that's the overall mix. I just simply added in also the iZotope Ozone vintage tape plugin, which is a tape saturation plugin. And I won't go through the whole thing, but there's a ton of tape saturation plugins out there. Grab one. There's even a few free ones that you can grab and play around with. All right, so that is the mix. Once I got it mixed to my taste, I went ahead and rendered it to a stereo wave file, and then I moved on to the mastering phase. All right, I've got the track pulled up in the software I use for mastering. It's iZotope's Ozone package, and it does come with a standalone editor, which is what this is. And so this basically allows you to load your track in, your stereo mixed track, and then you can add in plugins here in the middle to do that final mastering. So here is what the track sounds like as I mixed it. All right, it sounds pretty good. It doesn't need a whole lot. And in fact, that is true. It doesn't need a whole lot. But first up is an EQ. I actually used Ozone's capability of making suggestions and then kind of tweaking it from there. And Ozone suggested that we raise the lows and the highs to add more body and a little more brightness to the mix. And then I kind of took that suggestion and just kind of adjusted it from there. So let's hear what the difference is, maybe right in here. Okay, it's a pretty subtle difference, isn't it, on this type of piece? Let's try in this area. Yeah, so you can hear it a little bit better there with the higher pitched guitar part that was playing. All right, so that's the EQ. So we kind of got that set up for the overall mix. Second is dynamic EQ, and this is becoming more popular with a lot of plugins. It's basically kind of like targeted multiband compression. In other words, you can pick an EQ, a frequency in the spectrum, and instead of doing a standard EQ where you pull down the frequency or bump it up, you can set it up so it acts like a compressor. So for example, I've got this set to 1.58 kilohertz right here, and I've got a threshold set at 29.8 dB, attack and release, just like a regular compressor. Now check out what happens when I play the track. Okay, isn't that cool? So I use dynamic EQ a lot just to add a better balance into the overall tonality of the piece after it's been mixed. And you do want it to be subtle. You only want to be changing things half a dB, not a whole ton. So you can see the frequencies I've got set up here: 295, 371, 1.58. All right, so that's basically EQ and a little bit of EQ / compression for this sound. And so first part is to think about tonal balance, okay? By the way, this is kind of sounding like a promo for iZotope Ozone, isn't it? I promise you, I have not received any money from them. As a matter of fact, I gave them money. I bought all of my iZotope plugins. They don't even know I exist except for my customer number. I just really like their plugins, and I think it's very visual. You may use different plugins, but so you can get really great results regardless of what kind of plugins you use. All right, the last thing I want to show you is just the maximizer. After you've got compression, EQ kind of figured out mastering-wise, and you get a tonal balance that you like for your track, the last stage is really to get it into the right loudness level. All right, you've probably heard of the loudness wars where things were cranked up really high. One of the great things about all the streaming services is they don't let you do that. If you crank it up too high, they'll turn you down. So a good rule of thumb for most of the services, Spotify, YouTube, Apple Music, iTunes, etc., is about -13 to -14 LUFS. I don't have time to tell you about LUFS, but it's a loudness standard. And many recording software packages now understand LUFS, and you can meter for LUFS. So let me turn on the maximizer here. This is a limiter, a brick wall limiter, and you can see I've got the ceiling set to -1 dB, and that's one thing you should definitely do. It's if you've mixed stuff in the past and you wanted it really loud, you've got to get your head wrapped around this. Bring it down. So I'm setting it so peaks don't go above -1 dB. And then the threshold is how much am I going to crank it? How much louder am I going to make it than the actual mix? All right, so the way I'm going to figure that out is on my meter over here on the right-hand side where it says -15.7. I'm sorry it's so small. But if you watch it when I play the track, you're going to see that I'm shooting for somewhere between 12 and 14 LUFS, -12 to -14. Now check this out. Here we go. Okay. So I'm running at about -13.8 or so. I'm going to go ahead and crank this up just to show you what happens when I raise it up. I could get a little bit louder, and then I'm going to crank it way up, and you'll hear when it becomes too loud. Okay, so all of those little blue bars on the maximizer are areas where the signal hit -1 or above -1, and the limiter had to bring it down. So it's peak limiting at that point. If you can avoid peak limiting, you should try to do so because it does affect the sound. All right, so I'm going to bring it back down here. Let's check it out again. Sweet. That's kind of in the range. And then if you're mixing an album, what you'll want to do is go between each of the tracks on your album and balance out the level on your limiter so that each track sounds about the same level. It's the same level of loudness. I can't talk very well today. I'm sorry about that. So let me just run through a couple of these. You can see, I'll show you where the limiter is set on each of these tracks to kind of get them in balance. I won't run through them all, but here, track number 1's -3.7, track number 2's -5.7, 3's -5.5, 4's -6.2. So you can see that my mixes are relatively even when I actually mix them down, but there are some variances. And to get all the tracks at the same relative volume, I have to limit them to different levels. Well, there you have it, a look into how I mix and master an ambient guitar track. I hope you will subscribe, click on that bell notification so you don't miss the big announcement in hopefully just a couple weeks or so of the next Chords of Orion album release. And as always, guys and gals, I'll see all of you on the next video.